We will be talking in a month, and we will have actual fights announced either by then or maybe a week and a half to 2 weeks before. We will be talking about actual fights. The wait has been agonizing for months. Welcome back, everyone. This is Bando's Breakdowns, episode 79. Hope you all are doing well. My name is Zain Bando. Thank you so much for joining me for the final episode in the month of February. Greatly appreciate you guys coming in on this Friday afternoon as we wind down the month of February and we move closer and closer into the month of March, which for some people in sports is the best month of the year. Nonetheless, whatever your opinions are about that, I digress. Let's get into the show for this week. But before we do that, please be sure to follow across social media at Bando's Breakdown. Please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. To do so, go to youtube.com/ETB Network. That's where all the episodes for every single ETB Network show, including every episode of this show, every episode of ETB Sports, and every episode of every other show we do across the network, lives over there, as well as every single live stream. So for those who may know me from either this show or Zinger or elsewhere, you can check out those live streams over there as well under the live tab. On YouTube, you can listen to Bando's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts. And the great benefit of this is you get me several hours early. So if you want to start your Friday on the right foot at midnight Eastern, for those of you who may be listening to this again or for the first time, the audio only version, of course, of this is out a little bit earlier. For those of you on the video only side, you are seeing this for the very first time. But to do so, you can add me. You can add all the RSS feeds of the show, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, wherever you get them, you can find them. And for those of you who have never seen me before, my name is Zain Bando. I'm a sports journalist and an ETB Network co-host. Just briefly, what I do: I host this show. I'm a co-host of ETB Sports. I also contribute to Football Forecast and Forever Power 5 during the NFL and college football seasons. And then outside of here, I am a credentialed freelance sports journalist, several different outlets. You can find my work over at Sporting News. You can find my work over at MMA Knockout on Sports Illustrated. You can find my work over at Field Level Media, several other syndicates. Also dabbled into some Dallas Wings on Sports Illustrated, which I don't really talk about on the show all that much. And I've also done some contributions for Ohio State on Sports Illustrated. And if you want to go way back, you can check out my archived work over at Kansas State on Sports Illustrated and, of course, Illinois Fighting Illini on SI. But if you want all my current stuff, check it out, specifically for the college side of things, Sporting News. If you want all my UFC stuff, or at least my day-to-day UFC stuff, go over to MMA Knockout on SI. And if you want my weekly recaps of nearly every UFC event, minus Las Vegas numbered events, go check out fieldlevelmedia.com under the fighting tab there as well. So a lot of places where you can find me. And of course, as it's scrolling across the screen, you can follow me on social media at ZanBando99. So big show this week. No monologue like last week. We're going to get right into the show now, but it should be a fun show. A bunch of topics to go over, and then stay tuned for the end of the show, rather, for a exclusive interview with someone who I think you're really going to like. It's a former Big Ten / Pac-12 college football player turned entrepreneur, and I think you'll really like this guest. His name is Jalen Brown. You may have heard of him if you're a real OG Oregon Ducks fan and or Northwestern Wildcats supporter. So stay tuned for that later in the show. But for now, let's get into the show itself, starting with Zan's overview, what we're going to be discussing today. A lot going on. So we have some updates on the White House card. We also have some denials from UFC CEO Dana White. We'll get into what those are in just a second. We'll get into what is currently going on with the Big Ten men's basketball title race, what the latest update is regarding the Michigan Wolverines and what they have to do to win the outright championship. And then we'll go over some more UFC stuff, and then we will wrap it up with one thing I saw in Zinger Part 2. Before jumping into one of the best interviews we've done so far this year, we've already done a couple interviews. We took a break for about a month. There really weren't many coming through, but now I think we're back on a consistent schedule. So let's not waste any more time. All right. UFC White House event. So, bombshell news on Monday. Puck News, which is become a very prominent political and sports kind of inside baseball website, reported that the UFC was looking to change the date of the White House card from June 14th to June 26th. It was all but reported for about an hour or so on Tuesday until Dana White came out on Instagram and pretty much called the media full of you know what for that report. So it looks as if the UFC White House event is still on June 14th, but what he didn't deny is what the monetary figures of the event will be. So the monetary figures of the event are set to be triple what the Spirit event cost the UFC in 2024, which was 20 million, as opposed to this White House event being about $60 million. So my early reactions to this are this. First off, Puck News, if it's come out, in full to be false, eventually when it later comes out, because I know it probably will come out to be false. They needed to do a bit of a better due diligence, in my opinion. First off, the UFC never goes on Fridays unless it has to. That's like a total no-no. I can't believe that someone would even suggest that that's a possibility unless they had obviously a couple solid sources on it, which I'm sure in some respect either they did and the source told them bad info, or the UFC is hiding stuff that we don't know about. But I have tended to believe when it comes to dates that they're pretty strict and hell bent on this Saturday night ritual that's almost on a weekly basis, all but 9 weeks out of the year. So that was a major surprise to me that Friday was even in consideration. They never really do Friday cards. Some of the most notable ones ever: UFC 141, UFC 207. Then you have to go back all the way to like the mid 2000s to find a numbered event that was last shown on a Friday. The UFC really did a good job of moving to Saturdays in the mid 2000s, post Tough Boom, and they would go head to head with major boxing events, and they'd usually outsell them. Or they'd go on weekends where there wasn't a major boxing event, and they do really well because it was the only major pay per view on that weekend. So I don't know where this Friday thing came from. I hope I hope in all respects that it isn't true, just because the UFC being on a Friday is very unusual and it usually doesn't work like that. So I was very, very confused, to be frank, on that. But the 60 million figure, I don't doubt it. They have a lot to do. There's obviously logistical hurdles that they've had to overcome. They've even admitted, or at least Dana White has admitted, it's going to be a very difficult event to pull off. For obvious reasons, the report further stated that only 3,000 tickets to go into the actual event will be distributed, with 1,000 of them being reserved for people in the military, active military members. So, with that being said, it'll feel like a fight for the troops event, is how I kind of view it. But it'll be a fight for the troops event on steroids. It's going to be this, spectacle where obviously there's multiple title fights and stuff like that. It's not going to be a traditional fight for the troops, where it's a fight night and stuff. I'd like to see a traditional fight for the troops come back into the fold of the UFC schedule, because I thought it was a really good event. And they donated good causes and stuff like that. But should be interesting to see what happens. Again, no fights as of now have been officially announced for this card. There's been rumblings about, Conor McGregor. Who is he fighting? Is it Carlos Prates? Is it Jack Della Manuela? Conor still wants Michael Chandler. He keeps talking to people in the comments that he really wants Michael Chandler, although I don't think that's happening. But nonetheless, though, very, very interesting stuff. Dana White denying the new date, rather, of the White House card. It goes back to its original date, which is Sunday, June 14th, the president's birthday, Flag Day, etc., etc. Should be interesting to see how this all plays out. Final verdict I'll give on this is I think right now, at the time that this is coming out, February 27th, Friday, February 27th, we will be talking in a month and we will have actual fights announced either by then or maybe a week and a half to 2 weeks before. We will be talking about actual fights. The wait has been agonizing for months, but I think we're getting closer and closer to getting some actual announcements. And I think some people are going to be very surprised as to who may end up on this card. So excited to get into this more, but again, just wanted to talk about the latest development. The date is staying the same, and $60 million is the figure. We shall see what happens. All right, moving on briefly to some college basketball. The only college basketball topic we will get to, and there's a reason for that. So, the Michigan Wolverines clinched a share of the Big Ten regular season championship over Minnesota on Tuesday night at home. And now, there's a chance that Michigan could win the title outright. So here's the scenario as to why that's the case. So Illinois lost in overtime to UCLA at the buzzer. Donovan Dent was the hero there in Westwood. So obviously that gave Michigan a cushion there. As I just alluded to, Michigan just beat Minnesota. So now Michigan has a chance to clinch a Big Ten regular season title outright if they win one of its remaining regular season games, and that would include a win against the Illini. Those two teams play tonight. I will be in the building for that. State Farm Center in Champaign on Fox. Gus Johnson on the call there. Should be an unbelievable atmosphere. The first top 10 matchup in Champaign in 20 years. I'm very, very excited to see how this plays out. Number 10 in the nation versus number 3. So it should be very exciting as well. And so it's pretty simple. How can Michigan win the league title outright? It's a very simple scenario. Win one of its final 3 games, and they are Big Ten regular season champions. It doesn't matter who it's against, because right now they have the biggest cushion in the league to where the only way Illinois clinches a share is Illinois wins out and Michigan loses out. So Illinois kind of did this to itself a little bit. Losses to Wisconsin and UCLA did not help their cause or its cause. If it won at least one of those games or 2 of them, we'd be talking about a totally different story where this would be the Big Ten championship game overall. And it still is, but there's more pressure on Illinois than Michigan. So just bank on the fact that Illinois will probably finish 15-5 for the regular season with wins in 2 of its final 3 games. I'm almost positive it will certainly win the senior night game against Oregon, as they're one of the Big Ten's worst teams, if not the worst team. Obviously, the standings keep changing, but at last glance, Oregon was the worst team in the league. So we'll see what happens, but it looks as if Michigan is on the doorstep to winning a Big Ten regular season championship under Dusty May in his second season. And I'm just going to give an early congratulations because I know it's going to happen, especially even if Michigan loses to Illinois. I do think it'll beat Michigan State in the final game of the year, given that the game is going to be in Ann Arbor. But the good news for Illinois, though, is Illinois has not lost to Michigan in a long time. Should be very interesting with Morez Johnson coming back to Champaign. There's a lot at stake. Thankfully, Illinois is, for the most part, fully healthy. So it should be a great game. And as long as Illinois doesn't make fundamental mistakes, it should be really close and it should come down right to the wire. And who knows, if Illinois has the ball last, it may have a chance to shock the world, upset number 3, and give the committee a bit of a look for a possible clinch of a number 2 seed down the line, or a potential number 1 overall seed, which now seems more impossible than not. And for those that were excited to see Illinois in Chicago, more than likely that will not happen. More than likely, the path that you will see for Illinois is Illinois plays in St. Louis in the first round, and then it'll play in D.C., and then if they get out of D.C., it'll go to the Final Four in Indianapolis. But that's down the road. That's in a month and a month and 5 days, a month and a week, whatever you want to call it, but we shall see what happens. All right, back over to UFC. UFC Houston this past Saturday. We went 500, but we did get the main event correct. 500 meaning that we went 7-7. The main event saw Sean Strickland knock out Anthony Hernandez. And I'm not going to really get into his comments from earlier in the week. I really don't think it's worth anybody's time because it's old news. But let's talk about the fight. The fight itself was an okay fight. Sean Strickland picked it up midway through, and in the third round, he looked like he was a different beast in that third round. It was very impressive. I loved the way that Strickland came out, used his hands well, caught Hernandez with a knee coming up the middle, and knocked out Hernandez. He was on an 8-fight win streak up to that point, and Strickland put him back in his place. And Strickland is now firmly in the mix for a shot at the middleweight title. So the big question is going to be is what in the world is going to happen with Strickland moving forward? I think Strickland is going to take a little bit of time off. I don't think you see him on the White House card. I really don't. He's already expressed publicly he doesn't want to fight on that card. And I don't fully blame him. There's a lot of guys who don't want to fight on that card. Brandon Royval is another example of a guy who doesn't want to fight on that card because he doesn't really think he's fighting in front of fans. Who can really blame him for that, right? So I think Strickland's going to take some time off. I think we're going to see him fight in the summer. I don't know if it's going to be in June, but it's going to be sometime early July, August, somewhere in there. He's going to fight in the United States again. I just don't think it's going to be on the White House card versus who or whom rather. I don't know. I'd like to see a Duplessis trilogy fight, although Duplessis has already beat him twice. The first fight was still very close. Duplessis is no longer the champion. If Adesanya beats Joe Pyfer, does a rematch between Strickland and Adesanya make sense? Even though both of them are no longer champions anymore, is that a good 5-round main or co-main event on a card somewhere? I don't know. I think there's a lot of options though. It's going to be a big name fight for Strickland next. If he wins this next fight against whoever it is, he more than likely will get a title shot. So I will say that. So UFC Houston overall, main card was pretty good. Prelims weren't that good, but we live and we learn and we move on to UFC Mexico City. So UFC Mexico City this Saturday, still going on, even with all the attacks over there and all the just turmoil that's going on in the country overall. The event is still going on. It's still safe to proceed with it. The main event of the evening, Brandon Moreno versus Loner Kavanaugh. Saturday night, let's take a look at the card and let's take a look at the main event to start, and then I will go over some of the other fights. 5 Eastern for the prelims, as per usual, followed by the main card. It's a 13-fight card from the Arena CDMX, as per usual. That's been like a thing for them every year. This is the third year in a row that Moreno has headlined UFC Mexico City. So let's take a look. Brandon Moreno currently sitting at 11-6-2 in the UFC. His last fight was against Tatsuro Taira, which he lost in December. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. Loner Kavanaugh is a weight replacement. Brandon Moreno was supposed to fight Asu Amabayev. It's a big step up in the competition for Kavanaugh, who's 9-1, while Moreno is 23-9-2. Let's take a look here at the tail of the tape, ladies and gentlemen, if we can. Here we go. Here we go. All right, Moreno is a minus 245 favorite according to Tapology. Loner Kavanaugh is a plus 190 underdog. He has won 4 out of his last 5, while Moreno is just 2-3 in his last 5 appearances. Moreno 32 out of Mexico. Kavanaugh is 26 out of England. 5'4" versus 5'7", and their camps, Cabrera BJJ Academy in Vegas, while Loner Kavanaugh resides at home at Great Britain Top Team. All right. Tapology loves Brandon Moreno to win this fight. Most predictions are by decision at 85%, while the comeback on Kavanaugh is 15%. I am taking the former UFC flyweight champion here. I think this is a relatively easy prediction. just because Kavanaugh has not fought the level of competition that Moreno has. That's number one. Moreno, obviously a quick turnaround, so he knows the flyweight division is moving. We already know that Joshua Van is fighting Soturo Tyra in Miami. Whether it's going to be the main event or co-main event, we don't quite know. All the rumblings seem to suggest that it could be the co-main event. So Moreno knows he needs this win to stay in title contention, and to do so at home would be a big deal. I think he wins by decision. I think Kavanaugh comes out early. I think he uses his striking to frustrate Moreno the first couple of rounds, but I think Moreno puts it all together, uses his wrestling and ground and pound, and grinds out a 49-46 unanimous decision across 5 rounds to remain in a brutal flyweight contendership mix, if you will, this Saturday night. So that's the main event. If you want the preview of the full card, tune into the newest edition of the MMA Outsiders, or if you haven't done so already, that aired on Thursday with myself and Jack Gold. So just a reminder. Let's move on to the final few topics of the show before we get into the interview on the other side. All right, one thing I saw, Seth Davis put out some unsolicited advice about obtaining media credentials. All right, so for those of you who don't know, Ryan Hammer, who is a major college basketball content creator and has built a really nice following for himself, was denied NCAA media credentials to the Final Four. All right, and the reason for that is because he is not a traditional reporter. He's not someone who writes or is on TV or is on the radio or anything like that. His whole shtick is social media, which is a very new thing now. You can thank Katie Feeney for most of it. I mean, Katie Feeney is probably the most successful at this social media age trend, if you will, to get views and impressions and all that, and she's the best at it. So now a lot of people are trying to follow in Feeney's steps. So here's my reaction to this as someone who has obtained many media credentials over the last 7 years. Ryan Hammer has a right to be upset, okay? He has a right to be upset because more and more now, social media continues to be a driving force for some of these very high-octane sports, and college basketball is one of them. You can get most of your college basketball information through a couple of different apps, okay? No one is really reading people anymore. That's why, when I get people coming up to me and saying, "Hey, Zan, the last couple people have never really led with my writing ability. They lead with, 'Hey, Zan, we've seen your show and we like your show.'" Okay, so that's sort of a shift you're seeing, and I say it all the time that if you like just me and me only, and you want my real opinions on stuff, tune into this, because there's some stuff that I can say on here that I can't really articulate on some of the platforms that I'm with. So come here if you want my real unfiltered opinion, because that's all separate from all the other stuff I do, right? So Ryan's point, and he wasn't trying to be an idiot, he was just trying to say, what is the standard in 2026 for the NCAA to approve or deny media credentials? It's simple as that. So here's what I can say without giving too much away. There are various ways to obtain them. Okay, one of the easiest things to do to obtain them is to cover the same team consistently on a regular basis. Okay, so some rules say if you covered 70 to 80% of the home games, you should be able to get credentialed for the NCAA tournament. Others say if you have experience cover, even though they say in fine print that this isn't true, there's no way they don't look at this. They say that, if you covered one NCAA tournament, that doesn't mean you could cover the next one and the next one and the next one. I can almost debunk that and say there's no way that they don't at least look and say, hey, this is what this person has done over the last couple years. So my point in saying this is Seth Davis is right in one regard, where if you're nice to the PR people or the people running said event, more than likely you will get access that few people get. Okay, that is for certain. But number two, what he's failing to realize is not everyone has the either the clips or the work or the justification or even the backing of other people saying, hey, this guy deserves to get in. And a lot of people have to fend for themselves. Shoot, it took me 4 to 5 years to get credentialed consistently to various sporting events, regardless of what they were, right? So my point in saying it is not only do you have to be persistent, but you also have to have support from other people. And I think that's what his tweet was missing. And somebody else, who I'd rather not say on here out of respect, somebody else replied to him and said, hey, respectfully, what would you say to the people who don't get credentialed? And of course, his response went unnoticed, right? So my point is that everybody has their own opinion, to each their own. Should Ryan Hammer be credentialed for the NCAA tournament? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, he even tried to collaborate with the NCAA to do partnerships and stuff, and he's gotten in with some of the teams as well, where the teams know him and they know that he'll provide good content for social. But some of these major corporations just don't seem to recognize the value in some of these creators. And I've been lucky enough to go and cover some of these, but it's because I balance a written portfolio that I can show along with social. If I just did social, I am almost positive that I wouldn't be getting the access that I currently get now. So my point in saying all this is we can all be better. We can all help each other out. Not every answer is the same answer, number one. And number two, it's better to be helpful than just tweet into the void. And I think Ryan Hammer knows this, and I think he understands it. And I just wish the NCAA would recognize that these newer creators that are on social media constantly are creating content or collaborating with people. They need to do a better job of seeing those people overall, and I think that's really important. So that's all I have to say about that. If you guys want me to talk more about it, I can on a future episode. All right, last topic. Team USA should get a pass. It's as simple as this, guys. Was Cash Patel being in the locker room after the game a problem? Yeah, I'll admit that was a problem. But do we really think that most of those guys do we really think the first thing they're thinking about is, oh, Cash Patel is going to be in the room, celebrating with us? I don't think so. They just won a damn gold medal against Canada in a great game. I think people are blowing this way out of proportion. I think it's disappointing, and I also think that some of those guys just need to be left alone. And I think it's really disappointing that now we're being divided over a celebration of a historical moment for the country. And I think it's sad how people are twisting this. And I think Team USA needs to have fun. And a lot of those guys deserve time off. And now they're going to get some time off before they go back and, finish their NHL seasons and whatnot. But people need to get a gripe and people need to recognize that there's more to life than just people yelling about who's in what locker room and whatnot. Should he have been in there? Probably not. Probably not. But do we really need to blame a bunch of guys that probably had no idea he was even going to be in there? No. No, absolutely not. All right. Now it's that time and that part of the show where I tell you we didn't have any errors this week, which means it's time now for a special guest. So without further ado, in the next 30 seconds or so, you will hear from Jalen Brown, the co-founder of Proverse and a former college football player. Very insightful interview. That is the latest Bandos Breakdowns exclusive. So stay tuned for that right now, and we will be back to wrap up the end of the show and any loose ends, and we will see you guys in just a little bit. Enjoy the interview, and thanks again to Jalen for his time. Welcome back, everyone. This is a Bandos Breakdowns exclusive. Happy to be joined by Jalen Brown, an Oregon Ducks and Northwestern Wildcats football alumnus, as well as the CEO and co-founder of Proverse. Jalen, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Zain. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. And when I got this pitch, I was really interested. So before I get into my questions, just kind of tell the audience a little bit more about yourself for those that may not remember you or being introduced to you for the very first time.
Yeah, of course. Just starting with my football background, started playing football at the University of Oregon, and then from there finished out my collegiate career at Northwestern, where I unfortunately went through a very traumatic knee injury, which for me gave me a sign to kind of picture what life after football looks like. And then now, fast forward to today, I've started a new company called Proverse, where we're helping Gen Z stand out in the job market. So I've taken my sports background and professional career in technology to help bring this startup to life. So really excited.
For sure. And before we sort of get into it, just a question that I had too off the top. Did you ever envision yourself of starting your own company while you were finishing your college football career, or do you think it's all kind of happened it's sort of by chance and it's sort of where you ended up, or is that something that you've always wanted to do?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I think throughout my college period, I always had this, you know, very vague vision that one day I would start a business. Wasn't sure what. And so I started off getting a business degree and then quickly realized that the world of technology is evolving. So I jumped into data science and innovation. And it wasn't until my master's degree at Northwestern where I kind of came up with ideas relating to where I'm at today. So it was definitely an interesting transition, trying to take this very vague blob of an idea into now what we're going into is a tangible product that we can help others with.
Yeah, when you talk about that vague blob phase, did you ever envision that the company that you started would be in the position that it is now, or can you just sort of kind of talk about the growth of it a little bit?
No, that's an amazing part. I think the unknown aspects of it was what really drove me to where I'm at today. I was always a curious person wanting to explore things that I had never known before. Whereas with sports, you're particularly given a game plan, a strategy, a day by day routine of what you're supposed to be doing. And so this was my first time just exploring the depths of the unknown at this rate. So I had no idea it would turn into what it is today. I just know that at the end of the day, I felt like this could help a lot of people.
For sure, and kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit, can you sort of take me through just more of a general sense as to just sort of how your college football career sort of played out and just kind of what your favorite college football memory was? And it could be anything either on the field or off the field, just kind of whatever you want to share that would kind of give yourself and those listening and watching just a better glimpse of just kind of how everything kind of played out for you from your overall perspective.
Yeah, just a quick memory for on the field. I would say would be my last game as an Oregon Duck. We played at Oregon State, our rivalry game, and it was a chance for me to kind of play a little bit different position where I ended up having a pass play where I got to throw the ball. And so got to throw about a 40-yard touchdown to Darren Carrington. It was an exciting moment for someone who was focused on his craft as a receiver. It's always cool to do something a little bit different. And then off the field, um, I would say a favorite and also minor worst memory was my first week on campus at Oregon. It was one of the coldest winters they've had in a decade. And so I was dealing with sleet and snow and a big wake up call for a kid from the Arizona desert. So I'll always remember that moment.
Oh, I couldn't even imagine. Just hearing the word snow in Oregon does not make any sense at all. Well, I could only imagine the emotions you were feeling in those moments, those first couple of days, realizing, shoot, did I even make it to the right campus? 'Cause
Right?
that would have been that would have been my that would have been in my first thought as well, for sure. No
Exactly.
doubt, no doubt about it. And just kind of moving right along, what would you say is the biggest lesson that college football taught you is through your trials and tribulations? And if you could kind of talk about sort of the transition period and just if you can, whatever you feel like sharing overall, just sort of the knee injury and the realization that yeah, maybe my football career is legitimately over and I have to look to do something else in the near future.
Yeah, no, this is an amazing question. I think for me personally, it really has to do with identity. So for someone growing up where my whole life was sports and my family has a huge support and backing for that, I fed off of that. I fed off of the kind of the, what would you call, the external validation of making everyone proud and doing what everybody expects you to do and more. And as I got into college, I realized now I have more freedom. I have more choice to kind of make decisions and understand the world. And it came down to, I didn't really know myself. I didn't have a firm, strong understanding of my identity, yet I'm trying to continue to pour everything that I am into this game. And so I just realized I was, running on empty at times, trying to get through the different obstacles and hurdles of just college in general. And so transitioning into today, I've taken that adversity of figuring out who I am and have actually applied that into practice for our startup Proverse, where essentially we're helping Gen Z and early year professionals figure out who they are and how that aligns with the opportunities in the career world. And so I think the biggest lesson I would say from that is take the time and due diligence to shape and understand who you are, and also know that that answer is going to be fluid. There's going to be change over time with that.
For sure. And you had just mentioned this a minute ago too, and it's something that I wanted to sort of touch on a little bit more. You had talked about not really knowing who you truly were, like just from an identity standpoint near the end of your football stint. When did the wheels sort of turn for you? Just sort of knowing, okay, I feel like I have myself back, and I feel like if I go on this path, I'll continue to be successful, and I'll continue to build something that I can look back years from now and say, yeah, I did make the right decision, prioritizing me over, prioritizing the greater good and that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think the timing is actually ironic. When I would say the catalyst was when I injured my knee. In the moment, I was devastated, not so much in pain and hurt, but just more in shock of the moment. And from that moment, over that next week, it just made me realize that, you know, there's so much more that happens in the world that I can't control, that I can't understand, that I can't anticipate. Yet, what I can control is understanding and figuring out who I am, battling any sort of struggles and tough thoughts that I'm dealing with, and shaping who I am moving forward. And so that I can respond to any situation the best I can. So it was from that point on where I took rehab very seriously, both from a physical standpoint, but also mentally. And it really skyrocketed from there.
So you just more so kind of noticed, okay, the motivation of getting through rehab and just sort of being with your thoughts and kind of realizing, okay, I have to move on into the next phase of my life. That sort of what drove you to kind of say, okay, it looks as if I should do something else, and this is the path that I should be taking. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, I would even add that whatever I do from this point forward, speaking at the point of that injury, I do it more so for myself than ever. I think I was always doing it for other people, for my teammates, my coaches, my family, my friends. And from that point on, I needed to prioritize who I am as well and bring that to the table. And so it just so happened as after rehab was done, I felt it was best for me to transition to the next part of my chapter of my book.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that a lot of it's sort of those things that were instilled in you. You were like, okay, this is what I need to do in order to feel like I fully transitioned into something that I'll actually enjoy without the other mental stress added on. That completely makes sense. Sort of transitioning over now to the business side of things and building Proverse. What has been the most rewarding part of the experience, and what advice would you give to either young entrepreneurs either wanting to start the type of business that you're currently doing, or their own business altogether, or just people that sort of are fitting the mold of what you is looking for? When you talk about helping young professionals figuring out who they truly are and what they truly want to do, just and of how would you how would you break that down, and just sort of why do you think it's such an important time for people to sort of find themselves in sort of a generation to where everything is moving so quickly, and either people are shifting to multiple careers, or they're trying to do their own thing, and trying to be their own independent selves, rather than work for others. So just sort of how would you sort of break that down into parts, and it's sort of what advice would you give?
Yeah, no, a big question. I think how I would phrase it is more of building a vision rather than building a company. And kind of what I mean by that is when you set off in this world of unknowns and risk taking, you're going to have to understand that things aren't going to go as planned. And it's important for you as an entrepreneur to understand where to pivot, what risks to take, how to capitalize on your mistakes and move forward. And so with Proverse specifically, I've had to get away from my prototypical sports mindset of do this over and over and over and over until it works, into figuring out what works by lots of trial and error, experimenting, pivoting, and figuring out where the key problems are and then solving those. And so I think that's been, a huge rewarding experience for me, is building that level of resilience and courage to continue trying and pushing forward, even when things aren't so immediate. There's no immediate gratification with this process. I originally had this idea all the way back at Northwestern. It was very bare bones. Didn't think I would go anywhere with it. And then years later, started to realize, hey, I think this is something worth pursuing. Then I brought people on board to help out, and they believed in the vision. Then I started getting external feedback from users and recruiters, and they said there's potential here. And so from that journey, it's been this experience of push forward, figure out where to experiment, to try, and continue to push forward until you can't anymore. Tying that into the advice I'd give to young entrepreneurs, believe in that vision, right? I think that's the most important part that I've learned from this experience. There's always going to be ways to solve a problem. There's always going to be ways to experiment. But the biggest part that takes you over the hurdle is the vision piece. The people that I brought on to help out with Proverse, they believe in the product and the solutions and where we're going. But more so than anything, why they hopped on board was the vision. They could see it. They can envision where we're trying to go, and we can share that together. And that, to me, makes a huge difference as an entrepreneur versus any other role. And so just tying that advice would be, crystallize that vision through whatever efforts and measures that you need. And just remember that that's going to be that driving vehicle for that.
That's it's very very well said, and I think that's great advice. And I think anybody who sees this, I think a lot of them are going to be able to take that to heart. So I think that's really awesome. This is sort of a two-part one. Uh, coming up here, it's sort of the final few questions, but sort of something I wanted to know, because you sort of touched on this earlier in the interview, just about like your overall favorite college football memory, and just sort of how it ended and how you had to transition. Do you have any regrets about how your college football career played out? And if you were part of today's era in college football, would you have pursued NIL? Why or why not? And it's sort of, what do you think of NIL's impact on the sport as a whole? Because a lot of people have a lot of differing opinions, both on the positive and negative side. So I'm curious to get your perspectives on that, and just anything else you'd potentially like to share just about your football career overall, before we wrap it up with one more.
Right. Yeah. Interesting two-parter. I wouldn't necessarily regrets per se, but I will say, I think about how I was in certain moments, and me today realizing I would have handled those so much differently. I think a big example was when I first got on campus at Oregon. I had graduated high school semester early, and I was the only one in my class at Oregon football to do that. So I was kind of a lone wolf, a lone freshman coming into this environment. And as I mentioned, the snow, sleet culture shock, being away from home, a lot of change happening, and was pretty much just thrown into the fire, right? No freshman orientation and that kind of easy summer transition. And so from that, I think how I handled it was a little bit more retracting within myself and internalizing those stressors and problems, rather than reaching out and latching onto my teammates more. One example would be as the winter workouts, you get partnered up with teammates for your workouts during that season. And my first workout partners were Darren Carrington and Marcus Mariota. And so as a freshman coming into Oregon, seeing, star future Heisman icon who was also an amazing human being, being able to work day in and day out and have those conversations with him just made me realize that the type of person he was in that moment really gave a lot of influence to who I want to be moving forward. And so I think in that moment, I didn't latch onto that enough. I more so observed and just learned from him from afar. We did end up having an amazing kind of brunch meeting at Braille's, great place in Eugene.
Good to know.
I just got to see him as a human, right? And so I think to me that's more valuable than anything that I could ever get from that experience is those human interactions and lessons. And tying this into the two-parter with the NIL deals, I think at the time I was very fortunate and blessed growing up to have family and support and not being in huge financial stressors, as I know a lot of former teammates that I've had have dealt with. And so I would have looked at the NIL deals as closely as possible to, are these brands and organizations really contributing to people and making a difference and helping the world around us, and not simply just looking for, additional stipend or additional check. That's why, at least looking back, I would try to have done that. And I think today, to be able to have these opportunities for these athletes are huge in so many different ways. I would just offer the words to every athlete out there is, understand how this can help you financially, but then also understand how it can also contribute to the bigger world of NCAA and sports, right? This is a huge momentous change in our world, and I think it could be used for the better.
Well said. And also, you mentioned Mariota as well. Who would you say is the best teammate you played with in your college football career? Because I'm sure you have at least plenty of stories that you probably remember, but just given that you mentioned him, and just given that it was sort of an interesting an interesting time for you to just observe, what those guys day in and day out to better themselves. Who would you say was the best teammate you played with, or your favorite teammate to play with during your college career?
Yeah, no, I'll say two. The first one being Marcus. I think the story I'll give is there was a winter workout where it was an optional one where we were supposed to show up on our own discretion, and
Okay.
that's usually time for the players to all show up, and it's player led, and that shows a big signal of what this season is going to look like. And this first workout, a lot of people were either late or didn't show up, and it was a very tense moment. And this was for me, I felt like this was out of character for Marcus. He very vocally expressed his frustration. He was always very cool, calm, and collected, and spoke from an even-keeled temper. But in this case, he really just expressed himself for how much he was frustrated about this situation, how much he believed in this team more than what we were showing today, and everyone felt it. And I think that for somebody who's able to gain that level of respect by speaking very little, but when he does, everyone silences and listens. It's a factor of how he carries himself every single day on and off the field. And so that was always an amazing person to be around and gravitate towards. My second teammate would be a dear friend of mine also, Devin Melendez. He came in as a walk-on long snapper, and kind of a different reason for this answer. He was just out there enjoying himself. There was never a day where I would see him at practice or on the field and he was ever down or disengaged. He was just happy to be there, happy to work hard, help people around them. And he even reached out to me during my tough times, and we became friends during that moment. And so a type of person like him, he is just naturally selfless. And to see that there's players like that on the team that are just there to help and be there and enjoy the moment makes you just think back of why you're either too hard on yourself or maybe even sometimes having ego moments. It just gives you a reality check to say, this is a blessing and a grateful moment. Let's just enjoy this together as brothers.
Excellent. Do you still stay in touch with most of those guys too?
Yeah. So Devin Melendez is one of my best friends to this day. And I have a handful of Oregon buddies and Northwestern buddies that I still stay in touch with. I think I definitely needed to do a better job with others that I have been friends with. But overall, I think there are some relationships you build from these sports teams that are unbreakable. You know, one of them, I was one of his groomsmen for his wedding. And then, you know, even teammates back in high school, I actually got registered to wed one of my best friends who was his former teammate during high school. And so to be able to have that moment to say, we're literally battling on the field to I'm marrying you and your fiance, it's invaluable.
That's really awesome. And the last question I had for you today, Jalen, and thank you again for your time, is any final messages or words of encouragement to those who have declared for the NFL draft and are doing all they need to do to prepare for their day in April, to where their careers could literally change for the better forever?
Yeah, this is a great question. My advice would be both on the football and life perspective is really just figuring out how you respond. And I think, in other words, you're not going to control the outcome. There's going to be plenty of predictions or projections or conversations or noise happening in the world. But the only thing that really matters is how you respond to each moment. And I think if you focus on those micro decisions and micro thoughts and aligning that with who you are and what's better for you and your family and your close loved ones, then you're going to reap the benefits regardless of what happens through this. Whether that's, you know, you getting drafted early on or being undrafted, how you respond in those moments and the steps thereafter is what's more important.
Well said. And just finally, before I let you go, anything else you'd like to plug or promote for anyone that either wants to learn more about you, Proverse, or any other side projects you have going on? I'll let you have the floor for the final few minutes here.
Yeah, no, just one last statement would be we're in a point where we're launching a test group or a beta group for our new product that's coming out this spring. And so anybody that's interested in figuring out not only who they are in this professional world, but wanting to align that with the opportunities that's out there and be seen for who they are and actually being able to reach those career goals, come join us and be a part of this beta group this spring at goproverse.com. And, you know, excited to be able to contribute to both the career world and, you know, former athletes looking to take it to the next level.
That's very, very awesome here. Well, thank you so much, Jalen, for your time. I really, really appreciate you coming on my show, and I look forward to staying in touch in the future. And it's really cool to see how you transitioned from your life on the field to your life off of it. Keep up all the great work and success, and look forward to chatting with you down the road, man. Thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much to Jalen for his time. It was a very insightful interview. We got to learn a lot of stuff about his post-playing career, as well as what NFL players should be thinking about as they finalize their plans for the next leg of their football journey, whether it be the NFL draft or elsewhere after football. So with that being said, that's going to do it for another edition of Bando's Breakdowns. Please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe across YouTube and, of course, social media. To do so on social media at Bando's Breakdown, and, of course, on YouTube, youtube.com/EDB Network. You can listen to Bando's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts. And again, for those of you who've never seen me before, my name is Zain Bando. I'm a sports journalist and an ETB Network co-host. Thank you so much for tuning into another edition. This has been episode 79. So for everybody here at the ETB Network, thank you so much for tuning in. Greatly appreciate you all. We will see you all next week for episode 80. The first episode in the month of March is right around the corner. We will see you guys next Friday for all of that and so much more. And enjoy your weekend. Enjoy all the college basketball. Enjoy the UFC on Saturday night. And until next time, I'm Zain Bando. Thanks again. Really appreciate you all with this extended edition. And cheers. Thanks, everyone.